So we all know who Maulana Rumi is. Rumi is one of those great 13th century mystic teachers and poets who basically guided people. Even to this day, 800 years later, people still turn to his poetry, they still turn to his teaching as words of wisdom, as words that guide them through their lives. He followed the Sufi path, and Sufism predated Islam. And after Abrahamic tradition, Sufism somehow found a comfortable home in Islam. But Sufism is basically a path of love, a path of mysticism, a path of seeing divinity as love, as that glue that bonds. And Rumi was one of the great teachers who professed that love to a great abundance. In fact, so great a teacher was he that he was never really, in parts of the world such as Turkey and Iran, he's called Mevlana in Turkey and he's called Maulana in Iran because Mevlana translates to the great teacher or the teacher. And a common noun became a proper noun, and he just started being called Mevlana, like the teacher, because of his teachings and what he conveyed. So we're starting with his volume 1 of his big volume of poetry called the Masnavi. And we're on the first poem, which is called Listen to the Reed Flute as it tells its tale, complaining of separation as it wails. Since they cut my stalk away from the reed bed, my outcry has made men and women lament. I seek a breast that is torn to shreds by loss, so that I may explicate the pain of want. Everyone who's far from his own origin seeks to be united with it once again. Rumi uses the word reed. Reed is this wooden stalk, this plant. He says the reed is like a reed pen which is dipped in ink for writing, and the reed flute is an esteemed musical instrument. Quite often in Sufi gatherings, they would play the reed flute, and it makes this, it's like a violin, it makes this very wailing sound, a sound of yearning. And he's used that example, that the reed flute is this esteemed musical instrument, because the reed is actually a symbol of spirituality. It is a symbol of those who are arrived, who have arrived spiritually. The arrived, he says, are people that are always united with God, with divinity, with a higher power, with a higher force. They are not separate, they're always in that energy. Like people like us, we live our lives, we do our thing, and then we have moments, we gather and we remember what is greater than us, what feeds our soul, what nourishes us. Meanwhile, these people, they only live and bask in that light all the time. They are also people who have experienced countless suffering of exile. What suffering have they suffered? They've suffered the suffering of distance from God and countless torments of loss before they arrived to the stage where they've become like the reed flute that Mevlana says that only plays this music that is a music, the sound of yearning, the sound of longing. He says the arrived, we also call them friends, the friends. They communicate their torments of loss in burning tones like the reed flute in order to awaken people. Because when we hear the sound of the reed, or we hear certain musical instruments, or I feel like that with the violin as well, that it just makes you want to weep. It tugs at something in your heart, some strings in your heart that make you lament, that make you yearn. The reed is that kind of a sound, and sometimes when we're too frozen and distant from our feelings, sometimes that sound of longing and yearning starts to stir something inside. That is why the reed flute with its burning cry heard throughout, the music accompanying the whirling ceremonies of the dervishes. The dervishes are kind of like these people that have devoted their whole life to love and to dance and to poetry. That's how they live their lives. Furthermore, to be in the world, in the cage of the flesh, and Rumi calls the flesh, the body, a cage. He says, because it is like you are in a state which presents obstacles to union with God. In a sense, I guess what that means is that your spirit can always fly off and connect to beauty. Like we can sit here and we can connect to really awakened, enlightened experiences we had when we were together in Bali or in Turkey, or, you know, the spirit can just travel, but the body is still here. The body is like the cage because it keeps us gripped in one place. To be sure, for those who know the mystery of being one with God and who have grasped the infinite sublimity of it, such obstacles, such as the body, they are the cause of profound exile and longing. So it is as if your spirit wants to go off somewhere and it wants to be with something that is sweet, a nectar that it wants to melt into, but physically you are here. You know, like in Shavasana, sometimes after yoga, we just travel off somewhere. But the body is very much here.